Let me tell you how we almost lost everything. The galactic concordat had maintained peace for 12,000 cycles, 12,000 boring, predictable, safe cycles. 217 sentient species living in harmony, trading resources, sharing technology, and occasionally suffering through each other's cultural festivals. The Trill folks' 7-day burping symphony is still, to this day, the most excruciating diplomatic obligation I've ever endured. My name is Ambassador Klix'Vorn of the Zentari Diplomatic Corps, and until recently, my job consisted primarily of attending banquets and pretending to understand interpretive dance from species with anatomical configurations that defy description. All that changed when the void entities emerged from the dimensional tear near the Cygnus Arm. The first colony they consumed was barely a footnote in the Council's minutes. Regrettable loss of the Plindar mining outpost, they called it. By the time they devoured their fifth world, even the elders of Atarax who've spent millennia perfecting the art of not giving a damn were visibly concerned. "They're not stopping," Elder Zorix announced to the emergency assembly, his 7-eye stalks drooping with uncharacteristic gravity. "The entities have demonstrated immunity to our conventional weapons, psychic barriers, and diplomatic overtures." "What about the Krith battle fleets?" asked someone from the back. "Obliterated. Apparently, antimatter bombs just make them hungrier." That's when First Counselor Nixtala said the words that sent ice through my 3 circulatory systems. "There is one option we haven't considered." The chamber fell silent. We all knew what she meant. "No," hissed Elder Zorix. "The Concordat has strict protocols regarding Isolation Zone Epsilon 12. We do not make contact with them." First Counselor Nixtala's face tentacles curled in what my species recognizes as grim determination. Humans. The humans. Just saying the word caused several delegates to emit their species equivalent of a gasp. The Floraxi representative actually shed several leaves in distress. "The humans are quarantined for a reason," Zorix insisted. "Do I need to remind everyone of the Great Misunderstanding? Or the Proxima Incident? Or what they did to the harvest gods of Centauri Prime?" "The harvest gods were planetary parasites," someone muttered. "Yes, but the humans didn't know that when they decided to, as they put it, throw hands with divine space squids." Nixtala's voice cut through the growing commotion. "You look at the projections. Without intervention, the void entities will reach the core worlds within 6 cycles. We need the humans." And that's how I, the most junior ambassador in the Zentari delegation, found myself volunteered for a suicide mission to Isolation Zone Epsilon 12, better known as Earth. "Your species' physiological similarities make you the ideal candidate," they told me, ignoring the fact that I still had 3 more limbs than humans and skin that occasionally phases through solid matter when I'm nervous. Which is always. "Remember," First Counselor Nixtala said, as I boarded the diplomatic vessel, "under no circumstances are you to mention the noodle incident." "Perfect. Send me to negotiate with the galaxy's most unpredictable species, and immediately handicap me with conversational landmines." The journey to Earth took 17 days in hyperspace. That gave me 17 days to study everything we knew about humans, which despite centuries of observation wasn't nearly enough. Humans discovered faster than light travel 200 cycles ago, approximately 3 minutes before they should have by all reasonable developmental metrics. One day they were arguing about something called climate change, and the next they'd cracked open space-time because someone on their primitive information network said it was impossible. First contact went about as well as you'd expect. The Imzani delegation arrived in a ceremonial light cruiser, carrying gifts of advanced medical technology and philosophical texts. They left with half their ship missing, accidentally married to someone named Bob, and thoroughly confused about a human cultural practice called shotgunning beers. Subsequent diplomatic missions uncovered a species of bewildering contradictions. Humans were simultaneously the most compassionate and most aggressive species we'd encountered. They formed deep emotional attachments to mechanical cleaning devices, but waged wars over which invisible deity had the better backstory. They created breathtaking art and weaponized flatulence with equal enthusiasm. After the Proxima incident, where a human mining colony somehow defeated a Kronos-class destroyer using mining equipment, improvised explosives, and what they termed big die-hard energy, the Concordat voted unanimously to place Earth under observation, but limited contact protocols. Then came the final straw. The harvest gods of Centauri Prime, ancient entities that had controlled life and death on dozens of worlds for millennia, encountered their first human exploration team and made the mistake of claiming they owned the colonists now. 3 standard weeks later, humanity had somehow developed technology specifically designed to harm interdimensional beings, organized a militia they called the God Squad, and sent the surviving harvest entities fleeing into the void with what human records described as an existential crisis and several new orifices. That's when the Concordat created Isolation Zone Epsilon 12. The humans could keep exploring space, but major galactic powers would maintain minimal contact. This arrangement worked for nearly 50 cycles until now. My diplomatic shuttle dropped out of hyperspace near Jupiter, where the Treaty of Solar Limitation established a neutral meeting facility on Europa. I expected an imposing structure of some kind. What I found instead was a repurposed mining facility with a crudely painted sign reading Galactic Embassy Dave's Space Tacos, Tuesday Special, Quantum Queso. The docking bay controller who guided me in was chewing something pink and elastic. "Welcome to Europa Station, Ambassador. Sorry about the mess. We weren't expecting visitors from the Fancy Pants Concordat. Usually just get the Rigellian traders looking for contraband coffee beans." I followed protocol, stating formally, "I come bearing an urgent message for Earth's governing authority." The controller, a human female with hair modified to display multiple colors, simultaneously laughed so hard she began making a honking sound. "Earth's governing. Oh, that's rich. Yeah, good luck with that, buddy. We've got like 200 different governments, and half of them are mad at the other half on any given day. But who speaks for humanity in galactic matters?" She shrugged, a gesture I'd studied but still found anatomically unsettling. Technically the United Earth Space Authority, but really it's whoever hasn't pissed off too many people that month. Right now that's probably Captain Riley. She tapped a communication device. "Yo, Morgan, the squid guy from the Concordat is here. Says it's urgent." I bristled at the imprecise xenobiology. Centauri are clearly cephalopod adjacent, not squid-derived, but didn't correct her. My mission was too important for taxonomic disputes. "Sent into the pub," came a voice from the device. "The pub?" I asked. "The Public United Bureau?" The controller explained, then winked. "Just kidding. It's a bar. Captain Morgan Riley conducts all important business there. 3rd level, follow the sound of terrible karaoke." This was not at all how diplomatic protocols suggested first contact revival should proceed. As I made my way through the station, dodging humans carrying mysterious equipment and engaging in incomprehensible rituals involving hand slaps, I couldn't help but wonder if we were making a terrible mistake. The fate of the galaxy rested on a species that combined diplomatic meetings with recreational intoxication and synchronized noise-making. We were doomed. The pub assaulted my sensory organs before I even entered. A cacophony of sounds, smells, and electromagnetic frequencies poured through the doorway like a sensory tsunami. Inside, the situation was worse, until dozens of humans engaged in various forms of socialization that, to my untrained eye, resembled either mating rituals or preparation for combat. Possibly both. Ambassador Squid Face, boomed a voice from the far corner. "Over here." The speaker was a human of above-average height with facial hair arranged in a particular pattern that humans find significant. He wore what appeared to be a formal uniform, though the top buttons were undone, and he'd rolled the sleeves up in flagrant violation of what my briefing materials described as proper military decorum. "Captain Morgan Riley," he said, extending a hand, a gesture my cultural training identified as either a greeting, a threat display, or a prelude to a magic trick. I cautiously extended my primary manipulator in response. "Pleasure to meet you." "Drink?" "I cannot process ethanol efficiently," I explained. Riley grinned. Neither can I after the third one, but that's never stopped me, said Barkeep. Get our distinguished guest a Virgin Nebula Fizz. The server, a human augmented with what appeared to be recreational cybernetics, nodded and began mixing liquids with theatrical flair. So, said Riley, leaning back, the Concordat finally remembered we exist. It must be serious if they're breaking the pretend the humans don't exist protocol. I cleared my throat equivalent. Captain Riley, I represent the Galactic Concordat on a matter of utmost. Yeah, galaxy-ending crisis, existence-threatening catastrophe, cosmic horror beyond comprehension, yada yada. What else is new? He sipped his drink, out to the chase. Ambassador. What's trying to kill everyone this time? I blinked all three of my eyes in sequence, a sign of Zentari confusion. You seem remarkably unconcerned. Look. Riley said. Leaning forward, in the past decade, humanity has faced 7 extinction-level events, 4 divine judgments, and a reality TV show that nearly collapsed the quantum probability field. Last month, my coffee maker gained sentience and tried to unionize the kitchen appliances. I'm running low on concern. The server placed a violently blue beverage in front of me. It appeared to be sparkling. The threat, I began, trying to regain diplomatic momentum, are entities we call the Void Dwellers. They've emerged from a dimensional tier and are consuming entire worlds. They've destroyed our most powerful weapons, ignored our strongest psychic barriers, and shown no interest in communication. Riley nodded thoughtfully. And your big fancy Concordat with all its advanced civilizations and ancient wisdom is what? Fresh out of ideas? I felt my skin involuntarily phase slightly. The Concordat has exhausted all conventional options. So you're here because you need the crazy humans to do what civilized species won't. Riley's face split into what my species recognition software identified as a dangerous grin. What exactly do you think we can do that you can't? The void entities seem impervious to conventional physics. We need unconventional approaches. You mean the kind of batshit insane plans that got us quarantined in the first place? Riley laughed. Let me get this straight. You isolate us for 50 cycles because we're too unpredictable and violent, and now you want us to be unpredictable and violent on your behalf. I shifted uncomfortably. The Concordat recognizes that humanity possesses unique, creative problem-solving abilities. You mean we're the only species crazy enough to punch a god in the face? That is, not how I would phrase it in an official capacity, but essentially correct. Riley finished his drink and slammed the glass down with unnecessary force. Well, Ambassador Squidface, Klix'Vorn. Ambassador Klix'Vorn, you're in luck. Humanity is currently between existential crises and could use a project. He stood up. But we'll do this our way. No Concordat oversight, no bureaucratic interference, and definitely no filling out your 17,000-page risk assessment forms. I felt panic rising. This was not proceeding according to diplomatic protocols. Captain, the Concordat cannot simply give humans unrestricted. Those are our terms, Riley interrupted. Take M or leave M. But from what you've described, you don't have time to shop around for another species to save your collective asses. I realized with sinking dread that he was right. We were out of options and out of time. Very well, I conceded. What do you propose? Riley's smile should have been classified as a psychological weapon. First, we're going to need to borrow a few stars. Have you ever watched a human brainstorm? It's like observing controlled insanity. Within hours of our agreement, Captain Riley had assembled what he called humanity's finest minds, which turned out to be an unsettling collection of scientists, soldiers, and one individual whose only qualification appeared to be good at thinking weird. A planning session took place in a repurposed cargo bay. I watched in mounting horror as humans rapidly filled holographic displays with calculations, diagrams, and what appeared to be hand-drawn cartoons of the void entities wearing humiliating headgear. So these void thingies eat planets, right? Asked Dr. Eliza Huang, a physicist whose hair seemed to be engaged in an ongoing rebellion against gravity. What happens when they eat something that disagrees with their cosmic digestion? We don't even know if they have digestive systems, I pointed out. Everything has a digestive system of some kind, said the weird-thinking specialist, a lanky human named Jack who had not once sat properly in his chair. Even conceptual entities process and break down information. The question is, what gives a dimensional horror indigestion? Captain Riley was manipulating a holographic model of a star, Ambassador Klix'Vorn. Klix'Vorn. Whatever. You mentioned these things avoid or ignore energy weapons, right? What about gravity? I consulted my notes. They appear unaffected by normal gravitational forces. They've consumed neutron stars without difficulty. Normal gravity, sure, said Dr. Huang, her eyes lighting up in a way that made my survival instincts tingle. But what about abnormal gravity, twisted space-time, quantum gravitational fluctuations? Jack snapped his fingers. I see where you're going with this. What if we create a time-gravity paradox inside their feeding zone? I blinked rapidly. What? Simple, Riley said, as if explaining to a child. We use modified FTL drives to create localized temporal distortions, then collapse multiple gravity wells into each other while simultaneously inducing quantum uncertainty at the macro level. That's not simple at all, I protested, and it violates at least 17 laws of physics and 3 Concordat safety treaties. Exactly, Dr. Huang exclaimed, high-fiving Riley. That's why it'll work. These void entities evolved to counter conventional physics. They won't expect us to break reality itself. The last time humans broke reality, I reminded them, 3 star systems had to be quarantined because they temporarily existed Tuesday sideways. Jack nodded sagely. Good times. My coffee tasted like jazz music for a month. Word of the humans' involvement spread quickly through the Concordat emergency channels. Within days, a delegation of concerned representatives arrived at Europa Station to observe the human preparations. In reality, they were there to panic at close range. Elder Zorix nearly suffered multiple cardiac events when Riley casually explained their plan to briefly kidnap a small black hole, stuff it with quantum uncertainty, and basically feed the void entities a physics burrito that'll give them existential heartburn. This is madness, hissed the Mzani representative. You cannot simply repurpose fundamental forces as weapons. Watch us, said Dr. Huang, not looking up from her equations. The Floraxi delegate was shedding leaves so rapidly that a small pile had formed around their environment suit. The risk assessment alone would take years to. Done it, interrupted Jack, holding up a crumpled piece of paper with risk assessment scrawled at the top, followed by 1. Might die horribly. 2. Might accidentally create new universe. 3. Definitely gonna piss off some cosmic entities. 4. Worth it. I watched as the human team commandeered resources with alarming efficiency. They modified 7 starships in ways that made the Concordat engineers weep openly. They harvested exotic matter from the quantum foam between dimensions. They built devices that, by all reasonable scientific standards, should not work and yet, when activated, caused reality to hiccup nervously. Are you sure this is safe? I asked Riley as we observed the final preparations. He laughed. Absolutely not. But here's the thing about humans. Ambassador, safety's never been our species' strong suit. Survival, on the other hand, that we're good at. Is there a difference? I asked. Riley's expression turned serious for the first time since we'd met. All the difference in the universe. The Concordat builds safe systems that work perfectly under ideal conditions. Humans build redundant, messy systems that survive when everything goes to hell. Your civilization plans for success. We plan for failure, then punch failure in the face when it shows up. Looking at the chaotic, improbable fleet they'd assembled, I began to understand why the gods feared humans. It wasn't their technology or their violence, it was their absolute refusal to accept limitations, even those imposed by reality itself. As the fleet prepared to depart, Riley handed me a small device. Emergency translator, he explained, in case things get weird and you need to understand what we're saying. Your translators are already compatible with Concordat standards, I pointed out. He winked. This one translates human idioms too. Trust me, you'll need it. The void entities had consumed 3 more worlds by the time we intercepted them near the Orion Nebula. From our observation vessel positioned at what the humans insisted was a probably safe distance, I watched as the human fleet approached the swirling darkness that defied both senses and sanity. The void was wrong. Not just visually, but conceptually. Looking at it felt like trying to remember a word that doesn't exist. It hurt the mind more than the eyes. Target acquired. Announced Riley from the command ship, beginning Operation Cosmic Indigestion. The human vessels moved into formation with precision that surprised the Concordat observers. Say what you will about humans, but when they decide to do something insane, they do it with remarkable coordination. Initiating temporal fold, reported Dr. Huang. What happened next defied description. But I'll try. The space between the human ships began to wrinkle. Reality puckered like fabric being pinched from both sides of the dimensional barrier. Stars visible through the distortion shifted colors, smeared across the visual spectrum like wet paint. Black hole extract deployment in 3, 2, 1. A contained singularity, something that should have been impossible to transport, emerged from the lead ship's cargo hold, suspended in a field of energies that made my scientific training scream in protest. Quantum uncertainty injector active, came Jack's voice, sounding far too excited about potential universal collapse. The singularity began to change. Not in any way I could articulate with language that obeys the laws of causality. It was as if it existed in multiple states, simultaneously expanding, contracting, rotating in directions that space doesn't have. Is it supposed to look like that? Asked Elder Zorix, his voice quavering. Probably not, I admitted. The void entities noticed the disturbance. The darkness shifted, tendrils of non-existence reaching toward the human fleet with what felt like curiosity, gaze or hunger. They've spotted us, Riley announced, commencing Phase 2. All ships activate reality anchors. The devices on each human vessel activated, creating a web of energy that somehow looked both solid and fluid. The fabric of space between them stabilized, even as the modified singularity continued its impossible behavior. They're approaching the bait, Dr. Huang reported. Sheeting. Also, void entity primary mass shifting course. We watched as the darkness flowed toward the quantum singularity like water down a drain. It moved with purpose now, accelerating. Wait for it. Riley's voice was tense but controlled. Wait for it now. All 7 ships fired their modified engines simultaneously. The web of energy contracted, pulling the singularity and the approaching void entity into a space that seemed smaller than should have been physically possible. What followed was either a masterpiece of unconventional physics or a cosmic abomination. Probably both. The singularity, the void entity, and a significant portion of spacetime collapsed into each other, but not in the way a normal collapse works. This was more like reality folding in on itself repeatedly, creating a knot of contradictions that couldn't be resolved. The void entity screamed. Not with sound, but with concept. It was the mathematical equivalent of agony, broadcasting across multiple frequency bands and probably several dimensions. It's working, Jack shouted. The entity's caught in the paradox loop. The darkness writhed, trying to escape the trap of broken physics the humans had created. But each movement only entangled it further in the contradictions. All ships, full power to containment fields, ordered Riley, push that paradox deeper. The human vessels strained against forces they had no business manipulating. Warning lights flashed across their hulls as systems overloaded. Elder Zorix clutched at my arm. What happens if their containment fails? Before I could respond, Dr. Huang's voice came through, fascinating. The entity is trying to consume the paradox, but it can't process self-contradicting spacetime. It's like trying to swallow itself. The trapped portion of the void began to dissolve isn't the right word. Unravel, perhaps. It was coming apart not in pieces, but in concepts its fundamental structure unable to reconcile the irreconcilable nature of what it had consumed. The rest of the void entities recoiled, pulling away from both the trap and the affected portion of their mass. They retreated, abandoning their wounded aspect like animals leaving behind a diseased limb. "They're running." Riley's voice was triumphant. "Track their dimensional signature." Wah! The remaining darkness accelerated away, tearing a new hole in space as it fled not toward any Concordat worlds, but back toward the empty void between galaxies. As the human fleet disengaged their impossible devices and the laws of physics breathed a sigh of relief, I realized I was witnessing something extraordinary, but humanity had just scared monsters that had terrified gods. The celebration on Europa Station lasted for 3 standard days. I've never seen so many different species simultaneously relieved and disturbed. To the crazy humans, toasted the Mzani representative, who had previously advocated for extending the isolation zone to the entire Sol system. May they always direct their madness outward. Captain Riley, now hailed as a hero throughout the Concordat, took the praise with surprising humility. "We just did what anyone would do when faced with an impossible situation." "No," Elder Zorix corrected, his eye stalks now respectfully erect. "No one else would have done that. No one else could have done that." And therein lay the truth that the Concordat had been avoiding for 50 cycles. Humans were unique not despite their chaotic nature, but because of it. In the quiet aftermath, as diplomats drafted new treaties and scientists puzzled over the fragments of data from the encounter, Riley found me staring out a viewport at the distant stars. "Penny for your thoughts," he said, using an idiom my translator rendered as "I will exchange currency for your internal monologue." "I'm trying to understand," I admitted. "The Concordat has existed for 12,000 cycles. We've developed technologies beyond anything humans have achieved. Our oldest members have witnessed the birth and death of stars. And yet, when faced with a threat beyond our comprehension..." "You needed the new kids on the block," Riley finished, "the ones who still color outside the lines." I nodded. "The Concordat quarantined humanity because you were unpredictable, because you didn't follow the rules of physics, of diplomacy, of rational behavior. And that turned out to be exactly what you needed." So, Riley leaned against the viewport. "Here's the thing about humans, Ambassador. We haven't been around long enough to learn what's impossible, and by the time someone tells us, we've usually already done it. The Concordat Council's decision was unanimous. Isolation Zone Epsilon 12 was dissolved. Humanity would be granted full membership in the galactic community with certain caveats and emergency protocols that Riley found hilarious. "So we're like the Concordat's glass case emergency brake species?" he asked during the formal ceremony. "You'll call us whenever the universe throws something at you that follows all the proper rules of engagement?" First Counselor Nix Tala's face tentacles curled in what I now recognized as amusement. "Something like that, Captain." As I prepared to return to my regular diplomatic duties, which would now include regular contact with humans, God's help us all, Riley presented me with a small device. "What is this?" I asked. "Emergency beacon," he explained. "Direct line to Earth, just in case you find any more cosmic horrors that need a good kick in their non-Euclidean backsides." I accepted the gift with all 3 hands. "The Concordat has existed in relative peace for 12,000 cycles," I said. "What makes you think we'll need to call you again?" Riley's grin should have been classified as a strategic asset. "Because now that we're part of your club, the universe is going to have to get more creative with its problems. And when that happens, when you're out of options and out of time, you'll call the one species that terrifies the gods." As his words hung in the recycled station air, I couldn't help but wonder which was more frightening, the cosmic horrors lurking between dimensions, or the bizarre apes from Earth who faced the impossible with a shrug and a questionable plan. The strangest part? For the first time since the crisis began, that thought didn't fill me with dread, but with something suspiciously like hope. As the humans would say, the universe doesn't stand a chance,